Hello, writers, and welcome to the Author Burnout Coach. Together, we will dismantle the burnout culture in book publishing and reclaim our love of stories. I am your host, Isabel Sterling, and this is episode 4. We've all done it. We send off a query letter, or maybe even a finished manuscript to a critique partner, an agent, or an editor. We're able to step away, maybe for a few hours, days, or even weeks. But eventually, we start obsessively refreshing our inboxes. Like, we hope that by hitting refresh enough, the universe is going to come through for us and deliver that good news that we're waiting for. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong about doing this. If you enjoy getting excited about hearing back from someone, and then it's fun to refresh your inbox a couple of times a day just to check, that's fine. You don't have to change anything if you don't want to. And actually, as a quick aside, that's actually true about everything. I love self-development and I love setting big goals and all of that. But so often those things are built on this premise that there's something wrong with us that needs to be fixed. We're told that we need to get up early in order to be productive. There's tons of books about that. The early morning routine or whatever. We're told that we need to be kind to ourselves and everyone else 100% of the time, and that if we're feeling angry, that means we're not doing this positivity thing right. Or we need to have this perfect unconditional love for ourselves at all times in order to be a good person. There is just this endless list of things we're told we're supposed to do in order to be acceptable. So before we even get into today's podcast, let's just take a moment to send a big fuck you to the patriarchy, because it's created these rules that have absolutely no way to win. It is literally impossible because so many of the rules are contradictory and they're sort of built on this premise that no matter what we do, we're never going to be enough. So I just want us to take a second and say, listen, you don't need to do anything or fix anything to be whole or good. There's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to be fixed. And when you can truly believe that piece of it, setting goals and working on growing ourselves can come from a place of this pressure-free fun. So that failures and setbacks, those are just part of the process. They don't feel great, but they don't have any sort of they're not a stain on our humanity. They don't mean we're not good enough. It's just fun to try new things and push ourselves to grow. But it doesn't make us better to do that. And this is actually a journey that I'm currently working on. Even though I'm a coach, even though I get coached, every single week, I don't have a perfectly managed brain all of the time. Far from it. And that's okay. Nobody does. We are all human. We all have ups and downs. But one of the things I'm currently working on is letting go of this belief that I'm not doing enough. And this is one of my brain's favorite patterns. It comes up all the time. My brain will be like, you're not spending enough time with the baby. You're not being a mom well enough. I'm not writing enough. I'm not keeping the house clean enough. I'm not doing enough for my coaching business. And on and on and on. And it doesn't matter how much I actually do. My brain is just like, not enough, always, all the time. And that often leads me into this overwhelm spiral. And that leads to me getting less done, which is counterproductive and unhelpful. So I'm personally getting better at noticing when those thoughts come up and knowing that they aren't true, and then just letting them go. I'm practicing really learning and embodying that simply by existing, I am enough. Everything else is just bonus. Okay, so after that little tangent, you might be thinking, okay, Isabel, if I don't need to be fixed, why are you even bothering to teach me how to not be burnt out, or how to stop refreshing my inbox? And that's a great question. So we will get right back on track. So to recap, if you like refreshing your inbox, great. Don't change a thing. Now, I do recommend you do still listen to this whole episode, because I have some cool news at the end that you're not going to want to miss. But for those of you who don't like refreshing your inbox, maybe because you want to stop and you just sort of feel like you have to keep compulsively doing it and you can't stop, we're going to tease apart why this happens and why it feels like you can't stop doing it and why it just sort of perpetuates feeling like gas. So there are a few reasons that you might find yourself sort of constantly refreshing your inbox, hoping for good news, and they do vary a little bit based on what news it is you're waiting for. So there's sort of like two main camps. So let's say on the one hand, you've sent out query letters, or maybe you even got a full request from one of the agents, so you've sent off the manuscript and you're waiting to hear back. If you find yourself constantly refreshing your inbox in this case, it's likely because you expect you're going to feel some positive way when you get a good response. So if you haven't listened to episode 2, The Lies We Tell Ourselves, you're going to want to listen to that after this one because a lot of this sort of ties together. We so often believe that getting an agent or whatever that next milestone is on our list, there's always another milestone waiting for us. We think that that is going to completely change our emotional lives. We think that, once we get an agent or, insert your specific thing, if it's book deal, hitting a bestseller list, etc., we think that that's going to make us more confident in our writing. We're not going to struggle with self-doubt or imposter syndrome. We believe that, moving up a step in our career is going to make us happy. And when we believe that, we start to feel this sense of urgency because where we are right now isn't as good as where we think we're going. So we don't want to be where we are. So then we start to feel urgent. We need to get out of this place as fast as possible. So for me, this type of urgency often feels like this tension in my stomach, and then my chest might kind of feel hot and tingly, and I just sort of, all my limbs are kind of fidgety, and it just doesn't feel great. It oftentimes too lends me to start sort of fantasizing about how wonderful the future is going to be, and then being really grumpy that I'm not there already. For you, it probably feels a little bit different in your body, but I do want you to sort of take the time to figure out what does that feel like, and is it urgency? Is it impatience? It might be a slightly different emotion. So the next time that you find yourself waiting on an important email and you find yourself refreshing your inbox over and over, just sort of check in with your body and sort of try to catalog what you're feeling. Because as you're able to recognize those sensations, you can notice when you're feeling that. Sometimes you'll start to notice it before you actually open your inbox to refresh, and that'll help you start to break that habit. Now, the other sort of camp of inbox refreshing that I see is for folks who it's not about getting good news that's going to make them happier. It's about sort of getting a new to-do list item that they have to take care of. So I see this show up with writers who have external deadlines from an editor or an agent. And we'll use a very specific example here, just because I think specifics are easier for our brains to sort of wrap around than sort of broad generalities. But this applies to so many scenarios, so you can sort of adjust the details to fit what you're going through. So let's say that you have sold your debut novel. Congratulations. I hope you threw a little party about that. So you've sold that novel, and say you've already done your content edits with your editor, and you also have a second book on your contract. Maybe that's a sequel, or maybe something totally unrelated. And, while you're waiting for the next round of edits from your editor, you're like, maybe I want to get started on this next book since, the first one's almost done. To say it's another standalone novel. It's the same genre as the first book you sold, but it's unrelated. None of the characters overlap, none of that. So you've got all your ideas together for the second book on your contract, and you're ready to start drafting. Except you're not sure you want to get too deep into the new book because you're expecting line edits any day now. And you don't want to accidentally, get really into this new book and really get into that voice and have that voice bleed into the other book that you have to line edit since, that letter is due back in a week. So if you're new to publishing, you might not know this part yet, but editors don't always meet their deadlines. And actually, it's pretty common that they don't. And this is not a failure on their part. It's not a call out of editors. As I mentioned before, burnout culture affects publishing at every level, and that includes our editors. So sometimes notes can be days, weeks, or even months late. And yes, I said months. And a quick tangent, if your notes are months late and you haven't heard anything, please talk to your agent and have them follow up, because there should be some at least some communication so you kind of have a sense of what's going on. Anyways, the delay itself though isn't actually where the problems come in. It's not the level of lateness, although I will be upfront that that can create other kinds of like schedule and payment complications, but that's another topic. The problem actually is what ends up happening to us and our ability to create during that sort of like unknown wait period. So, since there's only a week until you get notes in this example, you decide, you know what, I'm going to wait to start drafting until I get those notes in, I do my line edits and sort of get them off my plate. And then as the deadline, that sort of like a week starts to get smaller and smaller, then you start to refresh your inbox more and more. And every time you hit refresh, you might find yourself getting like more and more annoyed. So instead of actually enjoying this week of downtime before you're back on a deadline, this irritation starts to bubble up and up and up, and you feel like you don't have any control over your time or your schedule. And then, let's say your editor misses that deadline. So, say it was due Friday, Friday has come and gone. Like, well, maybe it's just a little late, I'll take the weekend. And like part of your brain is still like itching to do this new project, but you're like, no, no, no. The notes are going to come Monday. Monday comes and still nothing. And maybe they say Tuesday, you're lucky, and the editor emails you and is like, hey, I'm super sorry. You're next in my queue. I will get to you very soon. So then you wait, and 1 week turns into two, and that turns into three, and now it's been a month, and you are just now, a month later, getting your notes. Which again, doesn't have to be a problem, but if you then look back at the month and every day you were refreshing your inbox and telling yourself not to start drafting yet because it could be any day now. And now, if you had just known that you'd have an entire month, I mean, you would have written all of Act 1. And then you're just like, what the actual fuck? Like, I have no control. This is ridiculous. And it starts to create this spin out cycle of irritation, anger, and frustration, and overwhelm. And all of it is just like not great. It doesn't feel great. And as much as we wish we could just like have everyone in publishing and meet their deadlines all of the time, we can't actually control other humans. So this shit is, it just happens sometimes. It's going to. Again, we cannot control other adults. They're their own, individual humans with their own brains, and they can do whatever they want. We can't control them. But what we can control is how we handle our brains when this stuff does happen. It doesn't have to be this huge spiral of frustration and anxiety and like, screw you, publishing, which we've all felt from time to time. So, the very first step in doing this is simply becoming aware of what it is we're doing. So, when you find yourself opening your inbox and starting to refresh your email, or maybe opening social media to see how many likes something got, it's a very similar kind of concept there. Try to pause and ask yourself, what is it that you're hoping you'll feel when this email comes through? What are you hoping this email will give you permission to do? And as you do this, you may find that sometimes there isn't really even anything you're looking for. The refreshing has just sort of become this subconscious habit. And then as you do it, it sort of then sparks all of those thoughts about like, oh, I can't get started. And all of that kind of comes because you've just habitually sort of opened that app on your phone. And if you are expecting good news, what is it that you expect you're going to feel? Do you think you're going to feel proud if you get an agent offer? Do you think you're going to be more confident? Whatever it is you're expecting to feel when that moment happens, ask how you can create those experiences for yourself now. Where can you give yourself credit for how far you've already come? Where can you find what's working in your writing instead of focusing on what isn't right? Because if you get into this habit of waiting for this next good thing to give you permission to feel proud or feel confident, you'll always just keep pushing it off and pushing it off and pushing it off. we really need to work on, maybe need is a strong word, but it's so helpful to work on how do we enjoy the process of where we're going? Because if we can't get that part right, we never really get to enjoy the destination because the destination always moves. We're always growing and expanding and doing new things. So the process, we got to find the pride and the confidence and the excitement and all of that in the process. You can enjoy the, accomplishments when they happen too, but that's like a moment in time. The process is like the months and years between those moments. So we don't want to feel like shit for months or years and then have this like moment of like, hooray, I got an agent, everything is wonderful. And then go right back into the process of editing and trying to get a book deal and having months or years of shit. And hooray, I got a book deal. That's not what we want. We want to learn to try to enjoy the process. So, for that other type of email refreshing, for those of you who are waiting on edits or some other kind of to do list type email, my first question is always, have you taken a break? And not just have you taken it, did you actually enjoy the break? Or were you feeling guilty about not working the whole time? In our culture today, it's very hustle, 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 do the next thing, I'll sleep when I'm dead, that kind of, paradigm. And it's not the most helpful, especially for those of us in a creative field. Breaks are wonderful for our creativity, and they work best when you're actively choosing it. There is a big difference between, hey, I am choosing to take a week off and I am going to really just enjoy that time away from my work and know that my brain's going to try to make me feel guilty and I'm going to say, nope, I'm choosing to rest. That's very different than sort of being overworked and then avoiding your work for a week. And, like, those are very different experiences if you don't do anything because you're avoiding work and when you've actively chosen not to do something. Very different. So, have you allowed yourself the chance to have that intentional break? Again, your brain tries to tell you it's bad to rest, but that is just more patriarchy bullshit. We don't get upset that think like babies aren't working hard enough. Like I don't get upset when my son who's like 20 months old, I don't get upset that he's not like building more Legos or whatever. His worth isn't based on that. Same as us as adults, our worth isn't based on how hard we work. And I'm honestly partially saying that just to remind my own brain I'm equally worthy when I'm snuggling the dog, writing my book, or making this podcast. One activity does not make me better or worse. So, if after you've had that break time, when you're still waiting for that, edit letter to come in, get curious about what you want to do next. Do you want to just enjoy an extended break and really let yourself take that time away? And, do things that fill your creative well or focus on other areas of your life. A lot of us who are writers have either families or day jobs or other things we have to take care of. Do we want to just let there be an intentional pause so we can take care of other things while we wait? Or are you truly excited to start writing this new thing? And if you are excited, but your brain keeps throwing up all these reasons why you can't get started because you don't know when the edits for this other project are going to come in, just ask yourself why. And for every answer, ask either like, is this true? Or so what? So what is probably one of my favorite questions. I ask myself that all the time when my brain is throwing up like, we can't do this because this is bad thing's going to happen. So an example might be something like, I don't want to get started if I have to stop in just a few days. You ask yourself why. Well, I won't be able to get enough done. So what? Is that even true? And as you start to dig into that, you might figure out like, what even counts as enough? Isn't a chapter or 2 or 3 better than having nothing started? So when we go back to it, we can sort of read what we already did and just sort of like jump right in. Again, watch the like, it's not enough. It's not enough. So as you work through this process, you'll find that either you do want to give yourself more time to rest without guilt, or you're excited to get even a little bit done because it'll give you a nice boost for when you do get to like really focus on that project. And also, I will offer that I think this idea of this like perfect time when we'll have all the focus in the world is kind of a lie that we tell ourselves. There's always interruptions. They may not always be another project, but there's always something. So just be honest to yourself when your brain is like, I'll wait and I'll do that when I can really focus. I don't know if that time ever actually comes. Even if you go on a writing retreat, there will be distractions with the other writers there who want to like hang out with you. So, if you do all of that and you still find yourself frustrated in checking email, you can also sort of step back and say, okay, what do I have control over? And honestly write down the list. And then every time you open your inbox, you can remind yourself of that list and then pick one and sort of focus there. So you're focusing on what you can control. So this might look like if you're querying a book, what you can control is not when the agents get back. That's you can't control that. You can't control if they no response means no you or if they give you a form. Like none of that's in your control. But what is in your control is getting excited about a new project, writing something else. You know, if you are waiting on, your editor to send their notes, you can ask your agent to follow up if it's sort of like past the agreed upon time. But once that's done and there's not really much more you can do sort of to control when they give you their notes, what can you control? Is there a new project you can focus on? Are there other parts of your life that need attention that you can take care of while you're waiting? Focus on what you can control. And honestly, in almost any circumstance, that is going to give you so much relief is just, where are 5 things I can focus on that I have complete control over? And it's the things you tell yourself, what you choose to do each day, the stuff that you can control. Okay? Now it's time for that special announcement. And so if you're listening to this sort of years in the future, you can skip this part and I'll see you in the next episode. But if you are listening to this the day it comes out, if it's still January of 2022, I want you to know that I am presenting a live webinar as part of the Pipeline Symposium. It's going to be Thursday, February 3rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I'm going to be teaching how to query with confidence. So we are going to go over not only the logistics of querying, the red flags to look out for, how to actually build a compelling query letter, all of that, but we're going to go really deep into my favorite part, which is how do you query without feeling miserable the whole time? And that, my friends, is the real trick. We can query and have it not blow up our creativity and make us like miserable. It is possible, I promise. I have queried, so many times. 6 times? 5? Yeah, 6 times. And I've had 3 different agents, which also is something we'll talk about in the future too, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about sort of having that one perfect agent who you have forever. It's not how it works, for most of us anyway. So, again, Thursday, February 3rd, 7 p.m. It is a 2-hour webinar. It is $35. You can go to symposium.pipelineartists.com to look it up and register. And you will get a recording of the session, whether you attend live or if you aren't able to attend live, just make sure you register ahead of the session. And they will also get some special customized worksheets that I'm creating to help you prep your query letter and track agent responses. So you do not want to miss this. So friends, that is all for this week. Next week, we will talk about a very common belief that leads directly to burnout, and that is wearing busyness like a badge of honor. Until next time, happy writing.